Good morning. Welcome to this amazing day. It's the 25th of December 2013. And the new sun is born. That beautiful sun is blazing away there as the old sun dies on the 21st of December and the winter solstice as the sun heads south to its furthest. And then on the 25th of December, the sun rises again, starting a new cycle. The sun is reborn, the born again one. So the sun starts another year. And from here on in, the sun will gain its strength, hence been called newborn, because every day the sun gains an extra minute of daylight. What could be simpler? So, as we can see how religion and religions across the world, various belief systems could be written around the motions of the sun in our galaxy, in our solar system. So I give praise. Welcome. So from here on in, the days will become, by a minute each day, lighter and lighter, by 1 minute, until the year is in an ascending process again, reborn. There's 3 cycles of the sun. There is the 24-hour cycle. There is the 12-month cycle, and there is the great cycle, the galactic cycle, the 25,920 years, and they all have the same pattern. Obviously, the greater cycle being the bigger pattern and the more important cycle, which our ancestors charted, and we totally and utterly lost sight of what the ancients knew. As the age of Pisces closed down, when the sun entered that sign, we shut down all that was known before, all that went before, all that wisdom and knowledge was shut down, and we became disconnected from our universal nature and became hopelessly lost in this time. So as the light gains 1 minute per day from now, on the great galactic cycle, our sun has arrived around the cycle a minute earlier each year, so that it appears to be falling backwards by a minute each year, right round the entire sign of the zodiac, the 360 degrees of the zodiac, and the 25,920 years. I won't get into that too much for now. What I wish to talk about a little bit was Santa Claus, the myth of Santa Claus. Now, if we stop for a moment to think that if we didn't disconnect our children from their magical nature in those first few years of life, we wouldn't have to invent Father Christmas for them to have something magical, some illusion to hold on to, when the universe is so magical that there's no need for anything mythical to to feed our children with. Now, I wish to speak about how Father Christmas or Santa Claus came about. Our dear wonderful, have you ever wondered how dear little fat Father Christmas, little fat guy with a cone-shaped hat and a white bauble on the top, who was able to fly around the entire world through the skies with his reindeers on a sleigh. Through the heavens, he was able to cross the entire planet to come to every child. And Rudolph, don't forget Rudolph's red nose as well. No. And the Christmas tree. We have the Christmas tree. Often people cut these beautiful trees down and put them in their living room corners, and then they get chucked away after a couple of weeks. When, quite simply, we should be going back into nature if we wish to see these pine trees, I believe, and leave them in their living environment. But just getting back to the myth of Santa Claus and how this came about. Now, there's this little known fact, or it's becoming more known as time goes on, of this little mushroom called the Amanita Muscaria, otherwise known as fly agaric or fly amanita. Now, coincidence? Fly, reindeer sailing through the sky. Now, this little mushroom is a little fat mushroom in its original state of growth. It is bright red, the same colour as Santa Claus's little outfit, and it has white little circular dots all over the head of it. Now, you'll often see this in children's little storybooks as well. You'll see these mushrooms everywhere. So, these mushrooms were found to grow underneath the little pine tree. See, Santa Claus, white outfit, pointy hat, white bauble, Amanita mushroom, pine tree. Starting to coincidence or starting to make a little bit of sense? Now, these little mushrooms were capable of having an hallucinogenic effect, a mind altering, or to allow psychedelic effect, should I say, allowing the mind to expand and explore a little bit more. So there was born the story of Santa Claus, and an absolute fortune has been made out of this phenomena. Think of the money every year that is spent on Christmas trees, on buying Santa Claus, and buying presents, on buying the absolute commercial fortune that someone made out of what was essentially a little mushroom, which we have been led to believe is also poisonous, which, again, another myth. Now, I haven't had the experience of these mushrooms. I've seen them often, and they're quite beautiful, but I've researched enough to know that they've got quite a wonderful mind-expanding effect. And they grow in nature, so they are natural. Now, I wish to talk about the lie of Santa with regard to my own experience. For as a child, I was a wise little old soul. I was a very gentle child and an incredibly sensitive child. So much so that I got shoved aside, basically, pushed into the... Nobody knew basically what to do with me. They still don't know what to do with me. And that's okay, that's fine. It wasn't fine then, it's fine now. My understanding wasn't in place at that time, it is now. So it all served a wonderful purpose. But at that time, I was incredibly fearful of humans, and I was incredibly fearful of adults and children. I don't know if that light is actually leaving my face in the well, you can't you can't see my eyes again, but the sun is I do love talking when I'm connecting with the universe via the sun. Makes perfect sense. It's my connection with the universe within myself and the greater space that is beyond the sun. As my awareness is much more fuller of the truth that the sun is not the only source of light, but rather I'm missing the word again. There's a word I'm looking for and I can't find it. But rather, it's not a symbol either, but it's a porthole. That's another word I was looking for. Where the greater space behind can project its energy through to us. So I have a great awareness of this now, since 2005. And getting back to Santa Claus. When I was a little child, I was I think I was 7. But I was always so excited about Father Christmas because this was magical for me. Magical, absolutely magical. I looked forward to it so much because I was scared of everything else. I didn't mix with anyone easily. I wasn't easily approachable. I very much retreated into my little inner sanctuary because I had a great difficulty reconciling my nature with the harsh vibrations and the loudness all around me. So I was in retreat and observing from maybe some might call now a remote observer. I was definitely remote. I was definitely removed from what others were doing and seeing and behaving. It was all so very strange for me. It didn't seem natural at all. And of course, my little instinct was always right, but at the time I didn't know how or why, and took many years to sort this out. But looking forward to Father Christmas was my one absolute excitement, the one time ever when I was allowed to feel each year excitement. This magical being was going to fly all over the world. And the last house he was going to come to was ours. Well, this was my father's explanation to me anyway, when we would go back to school after the holidays and find that some of these huge, big, wind-up dolls and stuff, and I'd have some tiny little, maybe Jack in the Box or something. And my father's excuse was always that Father Christmas basically his sack was empty almost by the time he got to our house, and ours was the last house he had to come to. So I never questioned it. I always appreciated having whatever I was presented with. But we had very little. Get your handkerchiefs out and start crying now, for God's sake. Only joking. But this particular Christmas, I got up in the middle of the night, and under the Christmas tree, searching for my present. And when I opened my present and seen that there was an umbrella and a handbag there, and I froze inside out. And it was like somebody took a knife and stabbed me and twisted it. The fear, the shock, and the coldness that went through me. Not because I got a handbag and an umbrella, but because instead of the guitar that I'd asked for, I just think I could be a fine guitarist, but By now I never got that guitar. It wasn't to do with the gifts or the quality of the gifts. It was the fact that I'd seen my mother purchase this handbag and umbrella a few months earlier in a shop, and I'd questioned her at the time, and she said it was for my cousin. So I left it at that. But when I seen it, it was the illusion, the myth had been smashed. Father Christmas didn't exist. Santa Claus didn't exist. So my one piece of excitement was absolutely shattered, smashed in a million little pieces on that floor, and I sat there rocking back and forth. Absolutely in shock, in absolute and utter fear. Fear that not only was the world a lie around me, but my parents were lying to me. I instinctively knew my sister as well was lying to me, because when they found me later, they came looking for me. Why hadn't I come back to bed? And I was absolutely frozen. I was blue. I was frozen cold. I couldn't move. Our house was cold anyway because we didn't have electricity or any modern conveniences or anything. So I would have been freezing ordinarily anyway. Well, you never get used to being cold. I never got used to being cold. But I was frozen, and it wasn't just frozen by the cold. It was shock. Absolute shock. I didn't know what to do. My fear was just mighty. It's very hard to explain it, really. As a sensitive child, so my mother and sister, they took me back to bed eventually. I wouldn't go to bed for a long time, but I went eventually, and they said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Santa Claus doesn't exist." And they laughed. And they said, "Don't be so ridiculous. Of course he does." And that was like somebody sticking a knife in again and twisting it. The lie repeated. And I said, "No, he doesn't exist. Don't be so silly. Don't be so ridiculous." Knife in again, twist. Who do I trust now? I can't trust my sister. I can't trust my parents. I can't trust anything. So that was my story of that time. And I think the importance not to lie to your children. And if your children do believe in the myth of Santa Claus, to actually, when you break the news to them, do it in the summertime or springtime or sometime when it's not that special day of the year. The only time I ever stood up and spoke out was to stand up for Santa Claus when I was at school. Someone said to me, "Oh, Santa Claus doesn't exist, it's your parents." That was the one time I would pipe up and say, "Don't be ridiculous, of course Santa Claus exists." Oh dear. Anyway, that is the story of where the pine cone. And that was the little tree as well, which it revered greatly because it's the one tree that never loses its maybe some pine needles might fall off them when you chop them down and stuff and they're in your living room, but they never lose they remain the same. Most other trees lose their leaves and so they kind of die and are reborn and depending on the time of year. But that was the one tree that right through the 4 seasons remained the same. The little pine tree. So that's the story of the myth of Santa Claus and the Amanita mushroom. And the message I would say would be, do not fool yourself, because anything that the imagination can conjure up, The universe is infinitely more magical than anything your imagination can conjure up. When you bring forth the light within yourself and remove yourself from the lie, this infinite connection that you have, it's not finite, the universe, it's infinite. And we are part of that infinity. Now, while I'm here, I might as well speak a little bit more about this sign of the zodiac of which the sun is residing in at this time and for the next 2,159 years. We are 1 year in. Now, as you know, with each sign of the zodiac, that each sign is very different from each other and stand totally different. Totally different qualities and principles and laws in operation. So the constellation of Aquarius has completely different set of laws and patterns than the constellation of Pisces had. Now the Pisces cycle was the closing up, the end of a cycle, the tying up of loose ends, the tying up of karma, the tying up of karmic debt, and coming into the golden age was the reborn one. The sun born into not only a new sign of the zodiac, but a new galactic cycle. My phone has just buzzed there, so I will, to save it being an interruption, I will finish off this particular talk for now and come back onto this subject matter. Have the most wonderful day in the rebirth of the sun into another new year, and the rebirth of the sun by 1 year or 12 months into another great cycle of change. This particular cycle that we've just entered into is just so dramatically different from the Piscean, because that was in the descending order still, the end of the Iron Age. We've come into iron to gold and dark to light. Now we will have 12,000 years in this ascending order, but 90% of that, I think it's 6,480, I think I worked it out as, in the golden, and 90% of that in the silver. So 12,000 years in the ascending order. This is a time of absolute and utter rebirth within self. A new structure, a new way of things. A conscious rebirth. A conscious reconnecting with self and the greater universe. The bringing forth of the light within ourselves and radiating it outwards, becoming our divinity, becoming the Christ consciousness, not seeking it outside of ourselves, but seeking it inside of ourselves and bringing it forth. Namaste. Have a most wonderful day. Oh God, goodness, not again. Yes, again.